Let's review the process of choosing either to go aggressive or to go conservative after the approximate. So let's review this, for example. Let's say we offer 150 to 220. Okay. Now you were asking me a couple minutes. When do we determine when do we decide to choose an option that's, let's say, 299, for example? So let's choose aggressive or 298. We'll choose, let's say 50-50. Why don't we call it 50-50? We'll go with, let's say 249, for example, and let's go conservative. Why don't we go 198? So why don't we review these three scenarios? Now, when we give a customer 150 to 220, our focus is to go as aggressive as possible. So in this case, we're looking at 298, okay? But how do we determine when to go aggressive and when to go conservative, right?
Right.
Okay, so number one, what we're gonna do is we're gonna evaluate the customer's response. Okay, we're gonna evaluate their gestures, for example. We're gonna evaluate their tone of voice, everything that has to do with their body language. Okay. So as soon as I tell you 150 to 220, if you give me, let's say for example, if you give me an expression that that you're shocked, or that you feel like the 150 to 220 may be too much, I may consider that as something negative. So your job before actually choosing the option is to determine to determine what percentage. So let's say for example the percentage that I mean is positive and negative. So let's say for example out of 100, okay. Let's say you're gonna start selecting, let's say 80-20, for example. So 80% positive, 20% negative. So let's say for example I ask you, the 150 to 220, how does that sound?
Not like too much.
Okay, so that would be
Negative.
more negative than positive, right? I mean, of course, I'll ask you a couple more questions to determine exactly how negative you are, but most likely that's not going to be 80 to 20. Now, let's say if I ask you again and you give me a positive response, but with some gestures, for example, 150 to 220 is the lowest that we have. That's technically what the insurance company is going to require. And let's say you tell me, okay, that's fine. But you made the expressions that you just made right now.
Right.
So I can still go with 80 to 20 because your body's telling me one, your expressions are telling me one thing, but your actual verbal responses are completely different. So that allows me to still go aggressive, okay? Because obviously we're still going to justify the options, correct?
Right.
We're still going to offer more information. So the way I want you to look at it, if the customer gives you expressions that are negative, okay, their response is negative, okay, everything is negative, then most likely we're either going to have to go with a 50-50, which in this case would be 248, a little bit more than conservative, right in the middle. And if the customer's telling you, no, I'm not, are you crazy, I'm not paying 220, I'm not paying 150, then most likely we're going to have to go very conservative at 198. So this process of asking the customer, how does it sound? How does the 150 to 220 sound? Can you make a payment of 150 to 220? Do you have the minimum payment of 150? It's not just asking those three questions. It's really evaluating everything else besides the yes, yes, yes.
Right.
Once again, their tone of voice, their gestures, for example, and obviously the responses. Let's say, for example, if you ask them, how does the 150 to 220 sound? And they're very positive and they tell you, look, I could do the 220 right now. And they take their wallet out and put it on the table. What does that mean?
They're ready.
They're positive. So that means we're probably going to shoot 300, 320, 350. Why? Because they have 220 with them and they're not hesitating at all. Does it make sense?
Right.
So now your job is going to be to start looking at clues. Does it make sense?
Yeah.
Clues to go aggressive or to keep the option conservative. You just don't want to give them an option of two. Let's say if we give them 249, right? You go 50-50. And then we determine that we should have went 298 because they paid everything in full. So technically that tells us that we didn't really evaluate the situation correctly. So once again, when you're offering the 150 to 220, there's not only the three common steps, which is to ask if they're okay with the approximate, to determine if they're able to make the approximate, and to be specific about the minimum, is not only to fulfill those 3 steps. In fact, is to evaluate the customer to see how positive they are. The more positive, the more we can charge.
The potential.
The more potential they have to pay. Does that make sense?
Yeah.